Churches have sure changed from what Christ established in the first century. And throughout the world, churches are all around us and part of society, part of many lives. Christ and his plan for us is great. And there are so many losing the opportunity as they want to go against what Christ has prepared for their souls. We have many churches built on a foundation on one verse. And it is their principle to guide their foundation. To be built on a singular message and not the fullness of Christ. The church is an image of God's word, a true depiction of his son Jesus. Every physical church has to come to grips that God has a clear message. And the physical that I'm referring to are the people. The church is not the building. The building is a place where the body worships. This is a fundamental understanding that every member of Christ must see. We must be made whole from living in God in its entirety. We shouldn't be part of a church that has a principle meaning hinged upon one verse. God's word must be complete. This is the way that we find salvation. In the book of Colossians, in chapter 3, verse 16, Paul talks about letting the message of Christ dwell among them richly, to admonish one another. That is to rebuke, to Because it's so important that his plan for our souls are shared, and that we fully grasp the nature of God's plan. And see, we also need to do it with wisdom. Wisdom from God's word. Not our own earthly thoughts about wisdom. And through the psalms and hymns and songs from the Spirit of God. Right? So this is not some outside influence. This is clearly from God. And we must sing to God with gratitude, with being thankful, deeply in our hearts. See, this is different from many churches that may consider themselves as alive in the gospel. They are not teaching nor living the entirety of the gospel. Church must be a place that we go to worship the Lord. Not a place where we're looking for convenience. If something doesn't sound quite right, it rubs a person the wrong way. Or maybe an individual may not like someone. And they have the wrong mindset about glorifying the Lord. So every soul is putting themselves in front of the Lord. It is His church, and it's not based on one verse. Every church that is truly serious about getting to heaven must have the right foundation. The time is right now to think thoughtfully about your church. Is it based upon every part of the Lord's image? Or is it hinged upon one verse, and that verse sets the course of everything that is done in that congregation? We're not going to church to feel good necessarily about everything that we hear. Our hearts should be pricked. Our minds should be challenged. And if we're not stretching, reaching for the Lord, and it's some feel-good message, It's not going deep enough. That church is not prepared for the Lord's return. You see, we always must be frank and sincere and loving about God's word. It's very difficult for many people, but we have to live righteously. If we truly want to have hope and get into heaven, the time is right now to take hold of your soul and turn it towards the Lord to find salvation.